The lobby's light looked expensive even before you noticed the crystal. A chandelier the size of a compact car scattered cold stars across the marble, and beneath it, people moved like pieces in a silent game. Concierges, executives, tourists, everyone pretending the night was ordinary. Aisha Carter, 29. A Black American interpreter contracted for the week's development summit knew better. Ordinary didn't hum through air vents or smell faintly of warmed metal. She closed the leather folder she'd just translated Arabic-French, then English, and rubbed at the ache behind her eyes. She could video call her mother in Atlanta for 3 more hours, remind her to take her evening insulin, and ask about the church fundraiser. Aisha was good at lists, invoices, due flights rebooked, verbs conjugated, pills counted. Lists kept chaos small. Chaos had a way of arguing. The doors of the Billionaire Hotel hissed open, and a man swept inside like a change in barometric pressure. Jonathan Drake, 38. A white American real estate magnate, and the week's most coveted and resented attendee, cut through the lobby with the kind of speed that made staff step aside before they knew why. Rumors said he'd just walked away from a $2 billion contract. The crease in his jaw suggested rumor had undersold it. He was polished furious, and Aisha clocked it with a translator's eye, performing calm for the security cameras, and no one else. She had translated for men like him, the ones who believed time was a currency other people owed them. She had also seen what those men looked like when the cameras blinked off tired around the edges, breath catching on old losses. Two truths could live in the same person. Aisha didn't have to like it to recognize it. She shifted toward the service corridor to avoid his path and nearly collided with 2 maintenance workers in gray uniforms. They were speaking fast, low, and in Arabic, assuming, like so many did in international spaces, that defaulted to English that no one outside their circle would understand. The taller one said, tapping a cheap digital watch. 10 minutes. His partner's eyes darted toward the elevator bank. The alarm disabled. Sprinklers are active only up to 41. Aisha's stomach went cold. They stared past her as if she were a column. She wasn't a column. She was fluent. The second man asked, and the man, the American. Suite on 42. He doesn't make it out. The first man's mouth was flat with something that wasn't quite hatred or nerves. Hale wants it clean. Hale. The name landed like a dropped glass, noisy even inside her head. Aisha didn't know a Hale, but she knew the cadence of an order being quoted, the brittle pride of men repeating someone else's power. Her hands tightened around the folder. She could tell security. She could call the desk manager. She could also do the math. If the fire started in 10 minutes and the alarms on 42 were dead, reporting the plot to a line of people trained to escalate would steal the one resource she didn't have time. Her mind traitorously offered her the list. Visa renewal in 3 months. Mom's next appointment. Rent due. Don't get involved. You can't afford to be involved. But she saw in a flash the apartment fire from her childhood, the one that took Mr. Whitaker's dog and most of the roof on their block in southwest Atlanta, how smoke turned a hallway into a decision. She remembered her mother hooking a hand in the back of her t-shirt and saying, "We move now. We will look later. Move now." Across the lobby, Jonathan cut toward the private elevator, reserved for VIPs, the kind with gold edges and its own call button. He didn't look up when the concierge murmured his name, and he didn't break stride when a junior manager tried to intercept him with a tablet and a smile. He hit the elevator button like it had wronged him. Aisha stepped deeper into the shadow of a marble pillar and watched the 2 workers split into the service stairwell and a utility room with a keypad lock. She listened for a siren that didn't start. She tasted copper at the back of her throat. This wasn't her fight, every practical bone in her body insisted. He was the kind of man who turned down a $2 billion deal like he was canceling a dinner reservation. She was a contractor who still checked airfare against bus tickets before she clicked purchase. If she stayed silent, the morning headlines would say tragedy. They wouldn't know her name. The elevator chimed. Jonathan stepped inside, phone already at his ear, voice low and hard. The doors began to close on polished shoes and expensive anger. Aisha moved. She didn't think about losing the job, the block listing, or whispering she'd overstepped. She didn't know how power punished women like her for being loud in the wrong room. She thought about a 10-minute fuse and an elevator rising toward a dead alarm. She jogged out from behind the pillar. "Sir," she started, too far away. The doors kept closing. She ran. Her flats slapped marble breath, catching as the chandelier's cold light fractured the air. The concierge startled, turning. A bellman called Miss Too Late to be helpful. The doors narrowed, then narrowed again. Aisha slid a hand between them just before the seam sealed. Pain zinged up her wrist. The elevator balked, scissoring open an inch, then two. She wedged her shoulder into the gap folder clutched to her chest and shoved. Jonathan's head snapped around. Up close, he looked like exhaustion had taught his anger manners. "What do you think you're—" "Please," Aisha said, English tumbling out on adrenaline. She met his eyes because you didn't waste precious seconds asking a man like this to believe you. You gave him a reason to. If you go to the 42nd floor right now, you won't return. His expression chilled. Security reflex liability calculus. A dozen lawyers in his glance. Step out of the elevator. Aisha didn't step out. Not yet. Behind her, the lobby looked normal again. People dragging suitcases. A child spinning on the slippery floor. A concierge answering the phone. The norm that made you doubt what you'd heard. She swallowed and pulled words into order, the right ones in the correct language. It was the only thing she'd ever trusted more than fear. She said her Arabic is clean and sure. They have 10 minutes. Jonathan stilled. The phone at his ear lost meaning and became a rectangle of glass. They turned off the alarm on your floor. The sprinklers won't reach it. Something like comprehension crossed his face. First suspicion, then the sharp attention of a man who lives by reading risk faster than rivals do. Aisha could hear her own heartbeat. She could also hear air moving through the vents above their heads, the hum that had sounded like nothing a minute ago, and now sounded like intention. She hasn't told him about the name Hale yet. She didn't tell him about Mr. Whitaker's dog. She kept it simple because simple is what saves people when the hallway fills with smoke. She said it was 10 minutes in English because fear likes to pretend it didn't understand you the first time. And the alarms won't sound on 42. The elevator doors, impatient with human drama, tried to close again. Aisha tightened her shoulder into the gap. Pain lit her arm. She held. Across the lobby, the two gray uniforms disappeared through their chosen doors. Aisha thought of her mother's voice. "We move now. We will look later." Jonathan Drake looked at Aisha Carter, like the future had just walked in wearing flats and a hotel badge. For the first time that night, he didn't look furious. He looked like a man standing in a hallway with 2 doors and 10 minutes he couldn't buy more of. Outside, somewhere far above, the building's ventilation coughed. Aisha took a breath. She hoped it wasn't her last as a contractor in the nicest hotel she'd ever worked. Decide, she said, quiet and steady, because translators learned early that tone can carry a message, the words can't. "But I'm not letting you go alone if you're going up." And with that, she pushed the doors wider just enough to step fully inside and turn a stranger's danger into her own. The seam of gold shut behind her with a soft final sound, sealing her ordinary on the wrong side of the glass. The golden panel above the door glowed the number 12 illuminated in soft amber. The elevator moved with the steady grace of a machine built to impress, silent, except for the faint hum of its cables. Jonathan Drake lowered his phone. For the first time since Aisha Carter had seen him storm through the lobby, he wasn't moving, speaking, or commanding. He just stared at her. "Explain yourself," he said. Finally, his voice clipped, practiced for depositions in boardrooms. Aisha steadied her breathing. She hadn't thought this far ahead. She'd thought only of stopping him from pressing that button. Now pressed against the cool brass railing, she met his gaze. Two men in maintenance uniforms. They were speaking Arabic. They said the alarms on your floor were cut off and the sprinklers wouldn't reach. 10 minutes, maybe less, before the fire started. Jonathan's expression barely changed, but his hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. "You're sure of what you heard I translated for a living?" And Aisha shot back sharper than she meant. Her nerves were a drum beat in her ears. "I don't make mistakes with words." He studied her for 3 beats of silence. The elevator passed the 18th floor. Then, with sudden force, he stabbed the red emergency stop button. The elevator jolted, shuddering as the brakes caught, and the light above froze on 19. The air seemed heavier, as though even the ventilation knew something was wrong. Jonathan lowered his voice, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "Repeat what they said word for word." She did, first in Arabic, then in English. Her tone was precise, professional, stripped of the panic twisting in her stomach. When she finished, she added, "They also mentioned a name. Hale. He wants it clean." Jonathan's jaw shifted. For the first time, there was something in his eyes other than irritation recognition. "You know him," she said. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a speed dial on his phone and spoke in a tone of command, so calm it chilled her. Orders fired in rapid succession: evacuation of his suite, a sweep of service corridors, confirmation of fire suppression on the top floors. He switched languages halfway through, fluent and authoritative, then ended the call with a final clipped, "Do it." When the line went dead, he looked at Aisha as if she had just complicated the blueprint of his entire life. "You realize what you've done?" "I stopped you from walking into a death trap," she said defensively. "You also involved yourself in a private war you don't understand." The words landed like a slap, not because of their harshness, but because they were spoken with absolute conviction. She wanted to bristle, to push back, but her instincts told her he wasn't dismissing her. He was warning her. Before she could respond, a faint scent drifted through the elevator vents. Smoke. Jonathan's eyes flicked upward. He pressed the control panel again, and the elevator lurched downward, this time headed toward the service level. His voice was grim. "The fire's already started." Aisha's pulse quickened. "Then why aren't the alarms going off?" "Because," he said, his voice almost a growl, "Hale plays to win." The elevator stopped on the service floor, doors opening to a stark corridor lit by harsh fluorescence. Concrete walls stretched long and narrow, lined with maintenance carts and steel doors. The scent of disinfectant mingled with something acrid, proof the fire wasn't just a threat, but real. Jonathan stepped out first, scanning the hall with a sharpness that made it clear he'd been in dangerous situations. He motioned for her to follow. "Where are we going?" she asked, her shoes echoing on the floor. "Garage. My driver will get us out before this turns into chaos." "And the people upstairs? The guests?" He didn't look back. "Security will handle evacuations." His certainty infuriated her. "You think money and orders fix everything. But if those men really cut the alarms, people are in danger." "I don't need a lecture," Jonathan snapped, spinning toward her. "You think I don't know the cost? That's why I'm still alive. I account for it. And right now, the price is that you and I stay breathing long enough to stop this from happening again." His tone was cold steel, but underneath, she heard it, the raw edge of fear, anger, maybe even guilt. They stared at each other for a moment. the air between them taut as wire. Then he exhaled, muttering almost to himself, Hale wouldn't risk something this public unless what she pressed. Unless he wanted to make a point. They turned down a stairwell, descending quickly, their footsteps echoing. Through a narrow window in the concrete wall, Aisha glimpsed the faint orange glow licking upward, devouring shadows. The fire was moving faster than she'd imagined. Jonathan said suddenly, "You could have walked away," his voice lower now. "You could have pretended you didn't hear." "I almost did," she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "But I remembered my mother pulling me out of a burning apartment when I was 6. She didn't stop to think. She just moved. I couldn't unhear what they said. I couldn't watch you step into an elevator and let it happen." Jonathan's expression softened, not much, but enough to show a man, unaccustomed to gratitude, struggling with it. "You may have just saved more than my life." They reached the garage level, and the heavy door swung open to reveal a sleek black sedan, idling near the stairwell. The driver, wide-eyed, rushed forward. "Sir, security reports fire on the 42nd floor. They say it started in your suite." Jonathan clenched his jaw. Of course it did. The driver opened the rear door. Jonathan motioned for Aisha to get in. For a moment she hesitated, the weight of what she was stepping into pressing down on her. She wasn't just running from fire anymore. She was entering someone else's battlefield. But she slid into the car anyway. The alternative was worse. As the sedan pulled away, weaving through emergency vehicles beginning to arrive, Aisha looked back through the tinted glass. From this angle, the top floors of the Billionaire Hotel glowed faintly orange against the Dubai skyline. Jonathan sat beside her, silent, his profile carved with fury and thought. After a long pause, he almost quietly said, "You've changed everything tonight." Aisha tightened her grip on the folder, clutching it to her chest. "So have you." And as the car merged onto Sheikh Zayed Road, the fire shrinking in the distance, but burning hotter in both their futures, she realized that she hadn't just stopped a man from walking into a trap. She had stepped into one herself, only hers was made of secrets, enemies and debts she couldn't yet name. The city lights blurred past, glittering and indifferent, as if Dubai had seen this story before and knew it would not end clean. The car's engine purred across the highway, the kind of sound money could buy, low, smooth, and nearly silent. But inside the cabin, silence meant something else. Aisha Carter sat with her folder clutched tight against her knees, every nerve still tuned to the smell of smoke, the sight of orange sparks flickering in the stairwell. Across from her, Jonathan Drake leaned forward with his elbows on his thighs, his phone glowing faint blue in the dimness as he cycled through messages. His face was composed, but his knuckles flexed white each time another notification arrived. Neither spoke until the sedan turned off the main road, leaving the neon spine of the city behind. The driver guided them through a desert stretch lit by scattered street lamps. A compound rose in the distance, white stone walls lined with palm trees, security cameras tracking their approach. The gates opened soundlessly. Aisha exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. This wasn't a hotel or a temporary escape. It was a fortress. Jonathan's driver opened the door when the car stopped in front of the villa. Inside, Jonathan set his tone, leaving no room for questions. Aisha hesitated. "My shift ended hours ago. I should be heading back." "Not tonight." His eyes met hers, firm but not unkind. "The men who set that fire will want to know who interfered. You'll be safer here." The words landed with a chill. Safer here. The implication was clear. Nowhere else was safe. She stepped out into the warm night air, the faint scent of desert jasmine carried by the breeze. The villa loomed above with modern yet traditional glass walls, reflecting the moonlight and courtyards hidden behind arches. Guards in plain clothes flanked the driveway, hands folded discreetly but watchful. Inside, the air was cool and still. The foyer spread wide with marble floors and a skylight that opened to the night. Aisha had seen hotels dressed to impress foreign dignitaries, but this space was different. It wasn't designed for admiration. It was designed for control. Jonathan motioned for her to follow him into a living room with bookshelves and contemporary art. He poured himself a glass of water from a crystal decanter, then gestured toward the couch. "Sit." The command bristled against her nerves. "I'm not one of your employees." His gaze flicked up sharply, surprise cutting through his composure. Then, to her astonishment, a faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Fair point." He gestured again, softer this time. "Please." She sat not out of obedience, but because her legs still trembled from adrenaline. Jonathan drank, then leaned against the counter. "Tell me everything again." Slowly this time. So she did. She described the men's uniforms, the cadence of their voices, and the exact words they used. She recounted the smell of smoke, the silence of the alarms, and the name Hale. After she finished, Jonathan was quiet for a long while, focused on something beyond the room. Finally, he said, "Marcus Hale was once my partner. We started in real estate together years ago. He had a brother who—" He stopped, exhaled through his nose, and shook his head. "The history isn't important right now. What matters is that he wants me gone, and he's willing to burn half a city block to make it happen." Aisha pressed her palms together. "Why? Why target you like this?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Because I refuse to play by his rules, and Marcus doesn't forgive." The statement hung heavy, but she noticed how he avoided her eyes when he said it. There was more layers of betrayal, maybe guilt, but he wasn't offering them yet. "I shouldn't even be here," she said. "I'm just an interpreter. My job is words, not whatever this is." "You're alive because you understood the words no one else could," he said, sharper than he intended. Then softening, "You may have saved 100 lives tonight, not just mine. That makes you more than an interpreter." Her heart tightened. He made it sound noble, but all she felt was exposed. She thought of her mother back in Atlanta, probably brewing mint tea for the night, oblivious to the fire in Dubai. Aisha wanted that simplicity back, the safety of being invisible. Jonathan's phone buzzed again. He answered quickly, his tone clipped and decisive. "Orders about evacuations, the extent of the damage, and the press are already circling." When he hung up, he rubbed the bridge of his nose. The billionaire veneer cracked for a moment, and he just looked tired. "You should rest," he said. "There's a guest room upstairs. I'll have someone bring you clothes. Rest." Aisha blinked. After nearly being burned alive, the faintest ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Shock burns hotter than fire. "Trust me, you'll need sleep." She rose, unsettled by his certainty. "And if I don't want to stay?" Jonathan studied her, the weight of his gaze both protective and possessive. "You can walk out that door if you choose, but Marcus Hale will know your face soon enough, and he doesn't leave loose ends." The words rooted her in place. She hated the truth in them. He added quietly, almost as if speaking to himself, "Sanctuary and cage are sometimes the same thing." Upstairs, the guest suite overlooked the desert, its floor-to-ceiling windows glowing with the last embers of the hotel fire far away. Aisha stood at the glass long after the housekeeper left her a robe and a fruit tray. She thought about choices, how quickly they shrank. 10 minutes in the lobby, 10 seconds in the elevator, and now no choices at all. She pressed her palm to the glass. She wasn't sure if she was safe, or if she had just stepped into someone else's prison. Jonathan sat alone in his study downstairs, whiskey untouched on the desk. He replayed her words in his mind, each tightening the noose Marcus Hale had been weaving for years. She was right, she didn't belong in this war. But now, because she had dared to speak and chosen courage over silence, she was part of it. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. The game had changed, and he owed her more than gratitude. He owed her survival. Morning arrived soft and gold over the compound, turning the white stone walls the color of warm bread. Aisha woke to the hush of filtered air and the nearly soundless tread of someone leaving a tray outside her door. When she opened it, jasmine tea steamed beside a small note in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. If you need anything, press 0. Lena. The quiet unsettled her more than the sirens would have. Hotels breathed. They exhaled, carts rumbling down hallways, doors thunking shut, a dozen lives crossing in a dozen languages. Here, everything obeyed light temperature footsteps, even the breeze through the courtyard. It felt like ordering an impression of safety. She showered, dressed in the simple clothes a housekeeper had left folded the night before, and texted her mother, alive. We'll call soon. Love you. The message hung unsent. No bars. A knock. A man in a dark polo stood there, posture relaxed, but attention absolute. Ms. Carter. I'm Khaled, head of security. He held up a phone that looked unbranded and expensive. For now, please use this for calls. Your personal device stays offline until we know it hasn't been compromised. Aisha lifted a brow. Compromised by whom? Maintenance guys with wrenches? By anyone. Hale pays, Khaled said evenly. He buys data the way other men purchase coffee. I need to call my mother, she said. I promised. We've already sent someone to check on her, Khaled replied. You can speak with her in 15 minutes through our encrypted line. She glanced past him at the hall. And if I want to walk outside? Alone? His answer was immediate. I'll send someone with you. It was too polite to be a refusal, and too final to be anything else. Aisha closed the door and let her forehead press against it. Gratitude clawed at annoyance. Annoyance bit back. She had chosen to step into this, but she had not chosen to surrender her life wholly. Downstairs, the villa opened like a secret. A planted courtyard offered cool shade and the hush of water over stone. Beyond that, a library with 2-story shelves and a rolling ladder drew her like a solved riddle. The spines made a language of their own finance architecture, histories of cities, and to her surprise, a wide run of novels and poetry. She tugged one free at random Baldwin, another Darwish bilingual edition. She traced the Arabic on the title page until the paper warmed under her fingertips. Good choice, Jonathan said from the doorway. He'd changed into a white shirt, sleeves rolled, no tie, a contradiction of ease and command. They regarded each other for a moment, two people temporarily sharing the same silence for different reasons. I need my phone. Aisha said, my real one. You'll have it, he answered. We're scrubbing it now. You can't scrub my life, she said. You can't keep me on a leash and call it protection. His eyes flicked not with anger, but calculation. I can keep you alive. I owe you at least that much. O and Own are cousins that look too much alike, she replied. I'm grateful for last night. I am. But I won't be a problem you solve between conference calls. He exhaled, and some of the set of his shoulders released. Fair. Sit with me for 10 minutes, then call your mother. After that, if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. They sat opposite one another at a low table by the window. The desert beyond shone like hammered brass. You said Hale used to be your partner, she began. You also said that wasn't the important part. It feels important. Jonathan's jaw worked once, twice, settling. We built our first properties together, he said. He was ambitious. I admired that. Then ambition turned into appetite. He gambled with other people's money. When I refused to cover his losses, he called it betrayal. He looked away to the courtyard, and for the first time the certainty wavered. Someone died because of the mess he made. After that, it was war. Someone, Aisha asked quietly. He didn't answer. The refusal wasn't cold. It was careful. A door he wasn't ready to open. What matters today, he said, voice steadying, is that he escalated. The fire wasn't a warning. It was a statement. And he'll try again. She thought of the men in gray uniforms, how they had spoken like a clock was already ticking. What does trying again look like? More fires. What kind of threats arrive as packages and ring at your doorbell? He prefers distance, Jonathan said. And spectacle. Markets move when headlines do. Then you need more than guards, she said. You need fewer secrets. His eyes found hers. From me, from everyone. Her voice softened. I grew up translating for my mother at doctor's offices where nobody slowed down enough to ensure she understood. Language can keep you safe or get you hurt. I want to do more than whisper between languages for rich men in glass towers. I want to build something that makes access normal. She hesitated, surprised to hear herself say it aloud in this room of marble and money, a translation co-op. Legal clinics, hospitals, not just English and Arabic Somali, Urdu Amharic, real coverage. He listened without interrupting, and the shift gave her the strangest feeling that the room had just tilted toward a future she hadn't allowed herself to say aloud until now. You sound like a founder pitching a seed round, he said, a ghost of humor at the edges. She said, I sound like someone who wants to stop being the emergency fix after the harm is already done. A heartbeat, then another. He nodded. All right. All right. What? All right. We'll fund it. Properly. Clean governance. Independent board. You are in control. No strings. She stared. You can't buy your way out of last night with philanthropy. I'm not trying to, he said. I understand the difference between protecting and possessing. The line hung there fragile as glass, and just as dangerous if dropped. Aisha set the Baldwin gently on the table. Then start smaller, she said. Start by letting me call my mother on my own terms. He stood. Come on, let's do it right. They crossed to a small office near the kitchen, where Khalid waited professional as a still lake. He handed Aisha the secure phone and stepped back. The connection clicked cleanly, and then there was her mother's voice, warm, curious, a little irritated that messages hadn't gone through. Relief rushed through Aisha so fast her knees weakened. I'm fine, she promised. Work got strange. She kept her tone light, editing catastrophe into complication, careful not to say fire billionaire or enemy. When she hung up, she found both men pretending not to have listened to every beat of her side of the call. Thank you, she told Khalid, meaning it. Ma'am, he said, with an incline, and was gone. Jonathan waited until they were back in the library to speak again. I was wrong earlier, he said. You were not a variable. You were the difference between a headline and a morgue drawer. I can be difficult when I'm cornered. You can be controlling when you're standing in the middle of your own empire, she corrected, not unkindly. It's not just about corners. He almost smiled. Noted. She looked out at the courtyard. What's the plan, Jonathan? You run, he hunts. You hide, he finds. You fight, people get hurt. Where does this end? He said, it ends when he is less potent than he needs to be, which means he needs to be seen sooner than he thinks. It wasn't a plan, so much as a diagnosis, but something about how he said it made her believe he'd already started turning the next page. By afternoon, the villa felt less alien. Aisha walked the gardens with Lena, who named the plants and told small, kindly stories about the staff. She found a map of language density across Dubai in the library and mentally sketched where clinics should go. In a bright corner of the kitchen, she ate lentil soup someone had made from scratch. Normal threaded itself quietly through the edges of fear. At dusk, the sky went the color of copper. Aisha found Jonathan on the terrace, jacket off tie, abandoned sleeves crooked at the elbow. Papers lay pinned under a glass, annotated in a precise hand. He looked up, as if he'd felt her arrive before he heard her steps. "Lena says you charmed the entire house in one afternoon," he said. "I'm decent at learning names," she answered. "People remember when you bother." He tapped the marked-up page. "Investors don't remember anything but yield. It's a failing." "Then teach them to remember," she said. "Language is memory training by another name." He watched her for a beat. "You really would build this co-op?" She asked if we would survive this week, and the honesty surprised them both with a small laugh. The wind shifted, bringing a hint of the city back to them. Spice heat and something like rain that wasn't. Her skin tightened with the sense of being watched, a reflex that had nothing to do with the guards, and everything to do with being suddenly visible to forces she didn't choose. "Walk with me," Jonathan said. They traced the line of the pool, the water black and still, stars caught in it like pins. He spoke without the armor this time. "I build walls because walls work," he said. "They keep chaos out and expectation in. But walls also do something else. They shorten sight lines." He glanced at her. "You saw what was coming for me, when all I saw was a closed door." "You saw the door had a timer on it," she countered. "I heard the click." They didn't touch. It felt like a decision. Before they reached the end of the path, Khalid's silhouette appeared near the hedge's, phone to his ear, then moving toward them with quiet urgency. "Sir," he told Jonathan, "we've confirmed ignition points on 42, multiple devices, timers. We also found a camera with a direct uplink to an offshore server. Whoever set the fire wanted to watch the result." Jonathan's gaze cooled to tempered glass. "And we pulled partial prints," Khaled said. "They tie back to a shell company linked to Hale in past investigations." "So he's not just angry," Aisha said softly. "He's documenting." "Because spectacle is half the strategy," Jonathan replied. He looked at her. Then not as a problem or a debt, but as someone who had crossed a line with him. "This won't be a short story. If you stay, we do this with rules, yours and mine." "Rule 1, she said, meeting his gaze. "No secrets. I need to know to make choices." "Rule 2, he countered, "no reckless heroics." She considered. "Define reckless." He couldn't help it. He laughed, and the sound loosened something in her chest that had stayed tight since the scent of smoke found the elevator. The desert night pressed close, warm and immense. Sanctuary, she realized, wasn't a place. It was a set of agreements made in the dark, with someone who could keep his word. And a cage sometimes was what you called the rules before you saw how they were built. "Call it a truce," she said. "Call it a partnership," he answered. They stood there a moment longer, the villa lights throwing long rectangles across the stone, the pool holding the sky without a ripple. Somewhere beyond the wall, the city kept glittering, indifferent as ever, while inside the compound, two people drafted the first lines of a plan that, if they were lucky, would keep them both alive long enough to make something worth the trouble. The next morning broke hot and cloudless, the desert day that bleached the horizon into nothing but light. From the balcony of the guest suite, Aisha could see the sweep of sand outside the compound walls, sharp and endless, like a warning painted in gold. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, though the heat pressed even through the glass. Inside, her phone lay silent on the desk. The scrubbed, unbranded device Khaled had given her blinked twice with a waiting message. Breakfast. 10 minutes. No signature. She didn't need one. The terrace had been arranged like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Linen tablecloth, polished cutlery, a carafe of coffee glinting in the sun. Jonathan was already there, shirt open at the collar, reading through a stack of reports. He stood when she arrived, pulling out a chair as though manners could erase the night before. "Sleep?" he asked. "Enough," she said. She poured herself coffee, letting the silence stretch. He tapped a page and slid it across the table. The official statement from the hotel was that there was an accidental electrical fire in the penthouse suite. Alarms malfunctioned. Systems failed. Her eyes skimmed the neat corporate spin, the kind of fiction polished enough to pass as truth. "They're burying it. Jonathan said they have investors and tourists to protect. The truth costs more than the lie." The answer landed sharply, not because it was wrong, but because it was expected. Aisha studied him over the rim of her mug. "So, what's the real cost then? A few bodies. A headline that drops your stock 2 points. His gaze flicked up hard. "That's not fair." "No," she admitted, setting the cup down. "But it's what you sound like." He leaned back in his chair, the reports forgotten, jaw tightening. "You think I'm indifferent to people dying? You think this life—" He cut himself off, exhaled slowly, forced his voice back under control. "I've spent years calculating risk. It's how I stay alive. It's how I keep thousands of people employed. Cold math doesn't mean I don't care." The words were reasonable, even convincing. But she heard the crack under them, where logic covered fear. "You lead like a general," she said. "But generals forget. Soldiers are people first." For the first time since she'd met him, his composure faltered. Not much, just a faint crease of exhaustion around his eyes. Then he stood abruptly, chair scraping against the stone. "Come with me." The car waiting outside was smaller than the sedan from the night before, though still gleaming, still armored. They drove not toward the city, but deeper into the desert, the road unraveling black and endless. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To see what Hale left behind." They reached the remains of a service building adjacent to the hotel charred walls. Melted glass. The acrid scent of smoke still clinging to the air. Investigators moved like ghosts through the wreckage, gloves glinting, cameras clicking. Jonathan strode ahead with the kind of authority that no badge could challenge. Aisha followed, her throat tightening as she saw the scorch marks climbing the stairwell, the twisted metal of what had once been a sprinkler valve. It was one thing to hear the words whispered in Arabic. It was another to see the proof. "This is what you stopped," Jonathan said quietly. He didn't look at her as he spoke. "I'd have been trapped up there if you hadn't spoken up with anyone else unlucky enough to be in the wrong corridor." She turned toward him, catching the flicker in his expression. Not gratitude, not relief. Something harder. Something like shame. "Then, why don't you let people know the truth?" she asked. "Because Hale wants me discredited." "Not dead," he said. "If I announce he tried and failed, he wins differently. Panic stock instability lawsuits, and he still tries again. So you cover for him. I play the long game." The conviction in his tone made her chest tighten. This was what power looked like up close. Decisions made not right or wrong, but in leverage and timing. And she hated how logical it sounded, even as it turned her stomach. That night, she walked through the library alone, fingers trailing across spines she couldn't focus on. When she found Baldwin again, she sat with the book open but unread. Jonathan appeared in the doorway with no jacket and sleeves pushed high. "You're angry." "Angry?" She let out a short laugh. "That doesn't cover it." "Then say it," he challenged. "You think protecting people means deciding which truths they're allowed to hear. You think money makes you the only one smart enough to calculate cost. But people don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be human, and you keep pretending you're not. The words hit him harder than she expected. He crossed the room, leaned on the back of a chair, and studied her. For the first time, there was no defense in his gaze, no shield, just a man who carried too much weight and didn't know how to set it down. "You're right," he said finally. "I don't know how to be anything else." The honesty unsettled her more than the arrogance. It made him human in the way she wasn't ready for. They stayed like that for a long moment and did not move until Khalid appeared with a tablet. "Sir," he said, tone low, but urgent. "We've confirmed Hale was sighted in Abu Dhabi 2 days ago. He's moving assets under different names, and he's not alone." Jonathan's expression hardened again, the walls sliding back into place. "Then it begins." He dismissed Khalid and turned to Aisha. "You wanted the truth. There it is. Hale isn't done. He's scaling up." Aisha closed the book without marking the page. The villa, the guards, the desert horizon all shifted in her mind. This wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It wasn't even a cage. It was a war room. And whether she liked it or not, she was already inside. By mid-morning, the villa had the focused hush of a courthouse. Aisha found a legal pad and a pen, the weight of a small promise, then sat at the end of the conference table. Jonathan entered with Khalid and a woman in a dark blazer, whose expression said she solved problems for a living. "This is Mara," Jonathan said. "General Counsel." Mara placed a thin folder in front of Aisha. "You asked for terms," she said. "We drafted a framework, but we'll start with your list." Aisha slid her legal pad across the table. "Independence," she said, ticking each item with the pen. "I am not your employee. I set my scheduled decline assignments that conflict with my ethics and keep ownership of any language tools or training models I create. Second, my mother's safety medical coverage, secure transport to her appointments, and a security presence that doesn't scare her. Third, transparency, access to project financials, partners' backgrounds, and any legal risk. Fourth, exit. I can walk without penalty when Hale is contained. Fifth, we incorporate governance of the translation co-op separately from your portfolio with independent directors and community seats." Jonathan listened without interruption. Fingers interlaced, expression unreadable. When she finished, he turned to Mara. "Can we do all of it?" "We can," Mara said. "But the co-op needs its own counsel and will need to firewall it from your ventures." "Good," Aisha said. "Add a clause that I can refuse any project if the Community Advisory Board flags harm." Jonathan nodded once. "Agreed." Khalid slid a second folder across the table. "Security for your mother." A driver vetted and briefed. 2 agents to rotate in plain clothes. Remote medical monitoring with her doctor's consent. "We'll run a background check on anyone who enters her building. If she prefers, we'll move her temporarily to a condo with discreet security." "She'll hate the condo," Aisha said, a small smile escaping. "She loves her neighbors. Keep her where she is, and tell your agents to knock before they help with groceries." Khalid's mouth twitched. "Understood." Mara began revising the language on a tablet, reading each line aloud for Aisha to approve. They moved efficiently. Partner, not employee. Equity participation, not salary. Mutual non-disparagement, except for disclosures required by law. Crisis decision protocol that prevented Jonathan from unilaterally exposing her to risk. With every clause, the scaffolding around Aisha's fear thickened into something structural. Jonathan leaned back. "You asked for transparency. It goes both ways. If you have doubts, say them before they turn into distance." "Then start with Marcus," Aisha said. "I need to know the shape of what we're in." He looked past her to the garden for a beat, as if the answer lived in the wind. Then he faced her squarely. We built our first deals together. Marcus was brilliant and impatient. His brother got into debt. I refused to launder money through our projects to cover it. The brother died badly. Marcus decided my refusal killed him. The man I knew disappeared. And you, Aisha asked, what did it turn you into? A strategist, he said. Sometimes a coward who calls himself cautious. He didn't blink away the admission. It landed like a hinge opening. All right, she said. We work with what's true. Mara slid the final draft forward. Aisha read every line, tracing the words with her finger like Braille. I want a clause that says, if you break transparency, I walk with full compensation for the projects I improved. Jonathan's mouth curved. You negotiate like someone who's had to fight to be heard. I negotiate like someone who knows silence is how people get hurt, she said and signed. He signed after her, the pen scratching once clean and final. The room inhaled. Welcome, he said. Not as a rescuer. As a partner. The first test came sooner than either of them expected. By noon, an investor consortium in London asked for an emergency video session. The Billionaire fire was already a rumor wrapped in legalese, and rumor corrodes money faster than truth. Aisha stood behind the camera while Jonathan's team arranged briefing materials, cash flow contingency plans, and insurance disclosures. Before the call, he glanced at her. You take the cultural lead if I miss nuance. You'll miss nuance, she said lightly. That's why I'm here. The screen filled with faces, a chair with clipped consonants and tired eyes, a younger man with a Moroccan accent, and the alert posture of someone accustomed to reading more than he was told. Two others with the blankness of people who only moved when numbers did. Jonathan opened strong, concise, factual, no adjectives. He addressed safety protocols and independent audits, spoke about protecting guests and staff before mentioning capital exposure. He didn't say Hale's name. He didn't need to. He made the threat feel understood without giving it oxygen. When the Moroccan investor asked a question in French about the stability of counterparties in the Gulf given sensitivities, Aisha stepped into frame. She answered in the same language, her tone respectful and precise. She folded in examples from recent projects where community cooperation lowered risk and increased yield, then switched smoothly into Arabic to underscore his point about trust building with municipalities. The younger man's posture changed from defensive to engaged. The chair's eyes warmed at the display of competence, not announced, but demonstrated. By the time the call ended, they had a provisional green light contingent on third-party verification. After the screen went black, Jonathan turned to her with a look that wasn't relief, but recalibration. You didn't translate me, he said. You translated the space. She said that's usually the problem, heat rising in her cheeks despite herself. Words are fine. It's the room that needs a bridge. He laughed under his breath, the sound caught between gratitude and surprise. Good. Keep building them. That evening, she called her mother on the secure line. A new voice came on, first patient and courteous, introducing himself as her driver, giving a code word and a second number to verify him on any day she wished. Her mother got on a moment later, torn between teasing and suspicion. I am not a movie star, she said. Why do I have a driver? Because my life got complicated, Aisha said, pacing the library's far row, fingertips brushing spines as anchor points. Let me have this one thing without pushing back. Her mother replied that you've never asked for one thing in your life softening. All right. But if this man tries to carry my groceries without asking, I will swing a bag of onions at him. I'll warn him, Aisha said, and they both laughed until her eyes stung. When they hung up, her chest tightened for the first time since the elevator doors had pressed her shoulder. Lena appeared with a small box. From procurement, she said, amused. Your working tools. Inside a ruggedized tablet noise-blocking earpiece, encrypted phone, and a notebook printed with a simple line. Say it right, or don't say it yet. You people really do everything with a flourish, Aisha said. Only the parts that matter, Lena replied. They spent the next hours drafting protocols, a decision tree for public statements, a cross-cultural brief for the London Consortium, a matrix of vulnerable choke points in ongoing projects. Aisha established a red flag system for rumors that sounded like Marcus's favorite tricks, mixing a teaspoon of truth into a gallon of lies. Jonathan pushed for speed. She went for clarity. They met in the middle more often than either expected. Near midnight, Khaled stepped in, eyes sharp. We picked up chatter, he said. A burner phone pinged 3 times near the hotel ruins, then again by the marina. Same pattern we've seen on Hale's operations. Is he here? Jonathan asked. No. Someone who works for him. And they left us a gift. He placed a sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside lay a hotel keycard, scorched at the edges with a note taped, "Second chances burn too." A timestamp scrawled beneath it matched the hour Aisha had thrown herself into the elevator. Jonathan's jaw went iron. He knows it was you. Aisha's mouth went dry, but her voice stayed steady. Then he knows I'm not quiet. Khaled inclined his head, approving the defiance, even as he mapped the risk. We'll adjust your movement protocols, he said. No solo walks, pre-cleared routes. We'll rotate vehicles and drivers. Make one adjustment for me, Aisha said. I won't make it easy if he's trying to send me a message, but I also won't disappear. Visibility is its own armor. Jonathan looked at her long and considering. I'll back that, he said. Finally, no hiding in basements. We move with intention. They stood, the 3 of them, over the small square of ash and plastic. The threat was theatrical and straightforward, Marcus's favorite register. Aisha felt fear, but something fiercer alongside it, the conviction that she would not be reduced to a cautionary tale in someone else's myth. Tomorrow, Jonathan said, we will brief the consortium's auditors. After that, we start building your co-op's slate. I want your project up before Hale can invent a lie about it. Aisha closed the evidence bag and set it aside. Then schedule the meeting, she said, and send Mara the charter draft. I want the community seats named this week. Khaled's radio crackled softly. He stepped away to answer. The villa felt almost like a home in the pause, not because it was soft, but because its edges were finally named. Jonathan's gaze dropped to the signed contract lying on the table between them. We'll do this like we agreed, he said. Rules, not rescues. Partnership, she answered. He held her eyes, then nodded once, as if binding the word to them both. Outside, the desert wind moved through the palms with the steady hush of an ocean too far to see. Somewhere in the city, a man tasted the thrill of his malice and mistook it for power. Let him, Aisha thought, turning off the conference room lights. Power that needs an audience always writes its own confession. She intended to be in the room when it did. The auditors from London were relentless. They scrolled line by line through spreadsheets projected on the villa's glass conference wall, their voices clipped, every query sharpened like a scalpel. Nothing escaped their questions. Insurance payouts, subcontractor vetting, offshore banking links. Jonathan answered with the ease of a man used to being dissected. He kept his tone calm, his gaze steady, his notes memorized rather than read. Yet Aisha noticed the subtle shift in his posture whenever Marcus Hale's name surfaced in coded language, a tightening at the base of his jaw, the faint clench of his hands folded on the table. When one auditor pressed on a Beirut housing initiative, flagging unusual volumes of cash transactions, Aisha stepped in. She explained that those numbers reflect cultural realities, shifting into Arabic for precision. Many of the laborers are migrants without bank accounts. Payment in cash is not an anomaly. It's survival. The risk is mitigated through worker councils who log distribution. I've reviewed the logs myself. The auditor's skepticism eased, though his tone stayed cool. Jonathan leaned back, letting her own credibility speak for both of them. It was a subtle acknowledgement. She wasn't a prop. She was the difference between suspicion and confidence. After 3 hours, the lead auditor muted his microphone and conferred with his colleagues. When they returned, their decision was short but significant. Provisional approval. Continued funding contingent on quarterly oversight. The villa exhaled with them when the call ended. Jonathan turned to Aisha, one corner of his mouth lifting. That was not provisional. That was survival dressed up as paperwork. She didn't smile back. They believed me because I could explain the context you left out. If you want this partnership to last, you need to let me do more than patch your blind spots after they show up. His amusement sobered into something like respect. Then don't wait to be asked. That evening, Khaled intercepted her on the way to the garden. He held a tablet angled away from passing staff. This came in through one of Hale's shell companies. On the screen was a still image, grainy time-stamped from a camera inside the Billionaire hotel lobby the night of the fire. It showed her face sharper than she liked, caught mid-stride, eyes wide, as she sprinted toward the elevator. Beneath the photo, a caption in block letters, she chose his side. Aisha's stomach hollowed. He's using me. Khaled's tone was quiet, but confident. He's using everyone. But this is deliberate. He wants to make you a symbol of betrayal, someone who sided with an enemy against justice for his brother. He'll spread it through his networks. It will reach beyond Dubai. She pressed her arms around herself, anger rising through the chill. So I get to be his villain. Not his, Khaled said. Ours if you let him control the narrative. You asked for independence. That includes owning your story before he twists it. Later in the library, she found Jonathan poring over a map of regional projects, a tumbler of water beside him untouched. She placed the tablet on the table between them. He stared at the image, jaw rigid, then shut off the screen with a decisive swipe. He's baiting us. No, Aisha said, her voice sharper than she intended. He's baiting me. He's framing me as the person who tipped you off. And you know what? He's right. I did. And if we hide from that truth, he'll weaponize it until I'm nothing but his version of me. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes dark, calculating, yet edged with something personal. What do you suggest? Go public, she said. Tell the story before he does. Not the details about his brother or your history, yours to keep until you're ready. But the truth about the fire, the alarms, the attack. Please make me a witness, not a whisper. You'll be exposed, he said. I already am. He paced once, twice, then stopped. If you speak, he'll know precisely how fluent you are and how closely you are heard. That makes you a target. Aisha held his gaze. Then protect me by standing next to me, not in front of me. The silence stretched. Finally, Jonathan let out a breath that sounded like surrender, disguised as agreement. We craft the statement tonight. We control the frame. And if Hale responds, we make sure he shows his hand. The press release went out the next morning. Under both their names, an interpreter overheard a planned act of arson, warned the developer involved, and prevented mass casualties. It named the hotel's failures, without naming Hale, documenting the evidence of tampered alarms and cut systems. The language was precise, professional, stripped of drama, yet impossible to dismiss. Within hours, international outlets picked it up. Some ran her photo beside Jonathan's. Others speculated on the identity of sources close to the conspirators. But in each telling, Aisha was no longer an invisible bystander. She was part of the story. She read the headlines with a mix of pride and unease. She had wanted independence, not a spotlight. But independence sometimes demanded stepping into view. Jonathan found her on the balcony that evening, city lights stretching like a jeweled river beyond the desert. "The market steadied," he said. "Not because of me, because of you. I didn't do it for your markets." "No," he agreed. "You did it because you refused to be defined by someone else's script." His voice softened. "That's what I underestimated." Aisha turned from the lights to his face, measuring him, the man who kept his walls high and his answers higher. "Then don't underestimate what I expect next," she said. "You promised transparency. That means no more half-truths about Marcus." For a moment, she thought he'd retreat, that he'd smooth over the cracks with polished words. Instead, he sat beside her and folded his hands not in command, but in confession. "He was more than my partner," Jonathan said at last. "He was my friend, my brother in everything but blood. And I let him down when he asked me to cover for his siblings' debts. I said no. I thought I was protecting the business, protecting us. The next day his brother was dead. Marcus never forgave me. Maybe he shouldn't have." The words landed heavy, the kind of truth that bends the spine of a man who has carried it too long. Aisha listened, not interrupting, letting the night hold the confession. When he finally looked at her, searching for judgment, she said only, "You can't rewrite the past, but you can decide what kind of truth you live with now." For the first time, Jonathan didn't look like the man who owned glass towers and desert fortresses. He looked like someone who had lost more than he admitted. And at that moment, the balance between them shifted again, not between rescuer and witness, but between two people tied by the cost of choice. Near midnight, Khaled entered the library, where they still sat, a secure file in hand. "We intercepted a message," he said, "from Hale's network." He placed the printed transcript on the table. It was short and written in Arabic with stark words. "Use her if fire fails. She will break him faster than flames." Jonathan's fist curled against the page. Aisha felt the chill crawl down her spine, but kept her voice steady. "Then we make sure that's the one prediction he never gets right." Jonathan met her eyes. Together. And with that, the war with Marcus Hale shifted from shadows to spotlight, and Aisha realized the next move would demand more than partnership. It would demand trust deep enough to outlast fire and lies both. The request came through channels they could neither block nor ignore. A handwritten and scanned message was delivered to Jonathan's private line by a courier whose name was checked out, but whose route was not. The note was addressed not to Jonathan, but to the interpreter. "A table waits at the Atlantis Hotel. Dinner service tomorrow night. Bring him if you like. Or come alone. Either way, I want to hear the voice that ruined my fire. Signed only M." Aisha read it twice, then set it on the table between them. "He wants me." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "He wants to rattle me through you." Khaled paced the length of the study like a shadow in motion. "It's a provocation. He'll have backup positioned. Camera's ears, maybe even local officials on his payroll. He's not asking. He's staging." Aisha folded her arms, staring at the note. "Which is why we can't ignore it. If we hide, he wins the narrative. If we appear, we control it." Jonathan shot her a sharp look. "You're not his bargaining chip." "I'm not," she said evenly, "but I am the witness he's trying to discredit. That makes me central, whether you like it or not." For a long moment, the study was filled only with the soft hum of the security monitors. Then Jonathan turned to Khaled. "Contingency plan. Layered security inside and out. No surprises." Khaled inclined his head, though his eyes betrayed his reluctance. "Yes, sir. But understand, Hale thrives on spectacle. The very act of meeting him feeds his ego." "Then we let him choke on it," Jonathan said. The next evening, the Atlantis Hotel gleamed like a jewel above the sea. Tourists drifted across the marble atrium, their laughter incongruous against the tension in Aisha's chest. She had dressed deliberately, a conservative blouse, dark slacks, hair pulled back. Nothing Hale could twist into glamour or weakness. She wanted to look like what she was, a professional, not a pawn. Jonathan walked beside her, suit pressed, expression carved from stone. To anyone watching, they could have been a power couple arriving for a business dinner. Only the discreet glances of Khaled's team stationed in lobbies and corridors betrayed the truth. The maitre d' guided them to a corner table with a view of the aquarium wall. Hale was already there. He looked nothing like the monster Aisha had imagined in the whispered threats of maintenance men. He was dressed in charcoal gray, a face almost handsome, if not for the cold amusement in his eyes. "Welcome," Hale said, standing with exaggerated politeness. His English was smooth, and his accent was softened by years abroad. And here she is, the woman who turned an empire into smoke. Jonathan didn't shake his hand. "You wanted a conversation. Make it quick." Hale's smile widened. Still impatient. Some things never change. He turned to Aisha. "Do you know what he was when we started Hungry? Brilliant and ruthless. We built towers together. Then he decided morality was more profitable than loyalty." Aisha held his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I know what you tried to do. That's not morality or loyalty. That's murder." He chuckled low and pleased, as though she'd performed for him. "Direct. I like that. But you misunderstand. Fire isn't murder, it's cleansing. It forces the truth to surface." His eyes flicked to Jonathan. "And the truth is, he always leaves people behind when they need him most." Jonathan's hand tightened on the table edge, but his voice stayed calm. "If you have something to prove, say it." "I already did," Hale replied smoothly. He slid a flash drive across the table, its silver casing catching the blue aquarium light. "Financial records, contracts, evidence of the laundering of your name is buried in. Take it, study it. You'll see. I'm not the villain. He is." Jonathan didn't move. More forged trails. "You've grown predictable." Aisha reached for the drive. Hale's eyes gleamed as she touched it, like a fisherman feeling a tug on his line. "Yes," he said softly. "She's the smart one. She'll see. And when she does, she'll wonder what kind of man keeps her close, only to betray her next." Something inside Aisha flared, equal parts anger and clarity. She slid the drive back across the table. "You keep mistaking me for someone who needs convincing." "I don't." Hale's expression cracked for the first time, a flicker of irritation beneath the charm. "Then you're a fool." Jonathan leaned forward, voice quiet, but edged with steel. "No, she's the reason you failed, and she'll be the reason you fail again." Hale's smile returned, thinner this time. He rose, leaving the drive on the table. "Keep it, or burn it. Doesn't matter. The seed of doubt is already planted. It always grows." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the flow of tourists, as if he were just another guest leaving dinner. Jonathan exhaled slowly in the car, the first break in his composure all night. He staged it perfectly, enough theatrics to unsettle, enough poison to linger. Aisha still felt the ghost of the flash drive's weight in her palm. "He thinks doubt is more substantial than proof. He's used it for years," Jonathan said grimly. "He bends half-truths until they look whole." Khaled, sitting opposite, placed a secure bag on the seat. Inside lay the drive, already sealed. "We'll run forensics," he said. "Track every byte, every metadata string. If it's a forgery, we'll prove it. If it's not, it won't be clean." Jonathan interrupted. "Marcus never does anything without mud on both sides." Aisha looked out the window, watching the city's lights ripple across the waves. Hale's words echoed, sticky as smoke. "He leaves people behind." She wanted to shake them off, but part of her wondered how many others had sat across from him and heard the same warning. Jonathan's voice cut into her thoughts. Don't carry what he said. That's his weapon. She turned to him, meeting his eyes in the dark cabin. Then give me something more substantial than denial. Please provide me with something true. The car fell into silence. Jonathan didn't answer, not because he wouldn't, but because the truth he carried was heavier than the city outside. And Aisha realized the meeting had changed the battlefield. Hale wasn't trying only to kill Jonathan anymore. He was trying to dismantle the trust between them, brick by brick, word by word. She set her jaw. Then we build faster than he can break. Jonathan studied her face, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Slowly, he nodded. Together. The car sped on, leaving the hotel glowing behind them, a stage where the first act of open war had just ended. Ahead lay the next move, deciding whether truth could survive in a world built from lies. The flash drive sat on the polished surface of the conference table like a live explosive. No one spoke at first. The hum of the villa's air system was the only sound carrying the faint scent of desert dust. Aisha leaned back in her chair, arms folded, as if distance could dilute its weight. Khalid broke the silence. We've quarantined it. Forensics will run in a secure lab, so there is no chance of contamination. But you should both prepare yourselves. Marcus Hale never delivers something without a fragment of truth stitched in. Jonathan's gaze stayed fixed on the drive. Fragments are his specialty. He turns a shred into a blade. Aisha spoke carefully. So what happens when the fragment looks like proof? Jonathan turned to her then, sharp enough that she felt the room tilt. You believe him? She held his eyes. Manipulation works best when it feels undeniable. If something buried in those files raises questions, I need to know it now, not after he's already used it to tear this apart. The words "this apart" hung heavier than she intended, but she didn't retract them. Jonathan's jaw flexed, then he stood abruptly. Fine. We'll open it together. No waiting for lab reports. Tonight. Khalid frowned. Sir, that's reckless. If there's malware, we'll use a sandboxed system. Jonathan cut him off. No connection to our network. Nothing leaves the room. Khalid inclined his head reluctantly. As you wish. An hour later, they gathered in the secure tech room, a chamber lined with racks of servers, sealed behind reinforced glass. An isolated terminal waited in the center, its drive already wiped clean. Aisha sat beside Jonathan as Khalid inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered to life folders, unfolding like traps. Contracts, wire transfers, scanned signatures. At first glance, everything looked legitimate, too legitimate. Aisha leaned forward, scrolling slowly. Construction payments are routed through Lebanon subcontracts to companies with no employees. Shell accounts feed back to charities that don't exist. Her throat tightened as she clicked open a spreadsheet. Column after column showed transactions with Jonathan's signature in digital ink. Millions moved in circles, then dissolved into numbered accounts. Jonathan's voice was low, almost even. Fabricated. He's spliced my real authorizations into phantom ledgers. Can you prove it? Aisha asked. His silence stretched long enough that her stomach knotted. Finally, he said, Not easily. These are designed to pass first-level scrutiny. Regulators will see smoke. When we prove there's no fire, the damage will be done. She pushed back from the desk, standing as though movement could shake free the unease pressing her chest. Then, you have to tell me exactly what's real. Every project, every transfer, every decision could be twisted. Jonathan rose, too, facing her across the glow of the terminal. I've already told you what matters. No, she said, heat edging her voice. You've told me what you think matters. That's not the same as the whole truth. I need all of it if you want me standing next to you when this explodes. Not polished summaries, not aftershocks. Khalid cleared his throat gently. You both need to breathe. Hale designs his traps to sow division. Don't hand him the victory he hasn't earned yet. But Aisha wasn't ready to step back. She saw in Jonathan's eyes the shadow of choices unspoken, and she refused to be the last to know. If even one contract could be read the wrong way, I want to see it every page. Jonathan's hand closed around the back of a chair, knuckles white. And if there is, does the paper make me look exactly like Hale says I am? Then we deal with it, she said, softer now, but unyielding. Together. But don't ask me to defend you blind. That's not partnership. The word struck him harder than anger. His shoulders dropped a fraction, the fight leaking out of his stance. All right, he said finally. You'll have access to every file. No restrictions. They worked through the night. Box after box of documents was wheeled in from archives Jonathan had locked away for years. Aisha combed through contracts with a translator's eye noting inconsistencies. Hale might exploit Khalid cross-referenced dates and signatures against corporate logs. By dawn, the room smelled of coffee gone cold and paper dust. Aisha pressed the heel of her hand to her eyes, exhaustion dragging at her bones. One file in particular caught her attention, a land acquisition outside Beirut. The payment trail was messy, routed through intermediaries, perfect fodder for suspicion. Why this detour, she asked, sliding the contract across the table. Jonathan rubbed his temples. Because the landowners wouldn't sell directly to a foreign firm. Local brokers were necessary. I made sure they were vetted. And if one of those brokers has ties to Hale, she pressed. His eyes darkened. Then it explains how he has this paperwork. But it doesn't make me complicit. The sharpness of his tone stung. But beneath it, she heard fear. The fear that Hale had found a crack large enough to widen. She closed the folder gently. Then we prove it, line by line, before he can. Later that morning, after Khalid left to coordinate the forensic analysis, Jonathan and Aisha sat on the terrace city skyline blurred by heat. The silence between them was thick, but different from before. Less anger, more fragility. He's not just trying to destroy my business, Jonathan said quietly. He's trying to destroy what's between us. Aisha slowly turned her cup in her hands. Then don't give him the tools. He looked at her, something raw in his eyes. I don't want to lose this. Not to him. Not to the ghosts of my past decisions. She met his gaze steady. Then let me stand with you before the ghosts arrive, not after. The words landed like an oath. He reached for her hand, not commanding, not claiming, just seeking contact. She let him, their fingers twining in the quiet. She felt the balance tilt back in their favor for the first time since the flash drive had appeared. They chose to face it together, not because the evidence was clear. Still, the doubt lingered at the edges, sharp as glass. Hale had planted the seed, and they both knew seeds grew fastest in silence. That evening, Khalid returned with preliminary results. He placed a thin folder on the table. The signatures are genuine, he said, but layered onto contracts that never existed. Deepfakes for paper. It's sophisticated but not unbreakable. With time, we can dismantle it. How much time? Jonathan asked. Too much, Khalid admitted. If he leaks this tomorrow, headlines will outpace truth. Aisha closed the folder with a firm hand. Then we don't wait. We go on record now. We show people the mess before he does. Jonathan studied her for a long beat. Then he nodded slowly. You want to weaponize transparency. I want to ensure the only lies that stick are the ones we already exposed. Khalid allowed himself the faintest smile. Then Marcus Hale may have finally overplayed his hand. Jonathan's grip tightened around Aisha's hand under the table. His voice carried steel instead of doubt for the first time since the flash drive arrived. Then we turn his game against him. And with that, the next move was no longer Hale's. The strategy was bold enough to make Khalid frown when first outlined. Transparency, Jonathan called it. Bait, Aisha corrected. Whatever the label, the plan meant. One thing stepping into Hale's arena, willingly, with cameras, witnesses, and no shadows to hide in. They chose the venue carefully. A press forum in a high-rise overlooking the marina, already scheduled to discuss regional development. With the help of sympathetic organizers, Jonathan and Aisha secured a panel slot. Instead of discussing blueprints and capital flows, they would drag Hale's schemes into daylight. "This is reckless," Khalid muttered, as the day drew near, triple-checking routes and contingency plans. "The man thrives on spectacle. You're giving him an audience." Then Aisha replied, "We'll give him an audience he can't control." Jonathan's tone was colder, more challenging. "He's turned whispers into weapons for too long. We'll make sure his lies die in the open." The morning of the event shimmered with desert heat. As the car pulled up to the glass tower, Aisha adjusted the headset tucked discreetly in her ear. Khalid's voice fed her updates secure. Perimeter-vetted attendees, security teams, staggered across floors. Still, she felt the tremor in her stomach, part fear, part anticipation. Inside the ballroom, cameras blinked like 1,000 patient eyes. The crowd buzzed with expectation. Investors, journalists, dignitaries. They thought they were here for policy debates. They were about to watch a duel. Jonathan opened first. He spoke not as a billionaire defending his fortune, but as a man willing to dissect it. He described the forged contracts, the shell accounts, the careful way Hale's team had spliced real authorizations into fabricated trails. His voice was even, his gaze direct. Then he paused and gestured toward Aisha. She stood steady, though her pulse beat in her throat. "I was the one who overheard the plan to burn him alive. I was the one who stopped it. And last week I received this." She held the flash drive in a sealed bag, the lights catching on its metal casing. Murmurs rippled across the audience. "He wanted me to believe Jonathan Drake was laundering money through ghost companies, that he was guilty of the same corruption that Hale himself orchestrates. Maybe you've seen the rumors. You may have wondered if they're true." She let the silence stretch, then leaned forward slightly, her voice cutting sharper. "They're not. And I can prove it." The screens behind her flickered, displaying two columns. Hale's forged ledgers on one side, authentic audited documents on the other. Line by line and transaction by transaction, Khalid's team highlighted discrepancies that were invisible to the untrained eye, but undeniable once shown. "This isn't transparency by choice," Aisha continued. "It's transparency by necessity. Because if we don't own the truth, someone else will weaponize it." Hale wanted me to doubt. Instead, he gave me the tools to expose him. Gasps spread through the crowd as the final slide appeared, an intercepted message traced to Hale's network, instructing operatives to use her, break him faster than flames. For a moment, silence fell heavy over the ballroom. Then reporters erupted with questions, cameras flashing like storms. Later, Aisha braced herself against the counter in the green room, hands trembling from the adrenaline. Jonathan entered a moment after his tie loosened, his eyes still burning from the fire of the stage. "You just turned the tables," he said quietly. "No," she replied finally, letting her hands drop. "We turned them. Together." Khalid entered, phone pressed to his ear, his expression sharper than ever. "Swiss authorities moved. Hale's extradition is approved. He'll be in custody within days." Jonathan's shoulders lowered for the first time in weeks. Relief, real and unguarded, washed across his features. He looked at Aisha with something more profound than gratitude. "You saved me again, but this time you saved more than my life." She met his gaze steady. "I saved myself too. He doesn't get to define who I am." Back at the villa that evening, they stood on the terrace as the city glittered below. The war wasn't over. Men like Hale never went quietly, but the tide had turned. For the first time, the future wasn't just survival. It was a possibility. Jonathan poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one, and raised his in a quiet toast to courage. Aisha clinked her glass against his to truth. And never let fear write the story. They drank the silence between them, no longer heavy, but full brimming with all that had changed. When the news broke the next morning, headlines blazing across every platform, their faces side by side accompanied the story. Not a billionaire, an interpreter, not an employer and an employee, but partners, survivors. And as their names trended, as messages poured in from strangers applauding their defiance, Aisha felt something new stirring in her chest. Not just survival, not even victory, but belonging. If you followed this story all the way here, take a second to share what part gripped you most. The fire that started it all, the whispered threats in the shadows, or the moment of truth under the bright lights. Please drop a comment below and let us know. And if you believe more people should see how lies can be turned back on those who spread them, hit that like button. And for those who want to keep walking with these characters as their journey continues into new dangers and choices, make sure you subscribe. That way, you'll never miss the next chapter of this story. Because if there's one thing Jonathan and Aisha have proven, it's that survival isn't the end. It's only the beginning.